Hi, this is John, and welcome to another edition of Statistics Tell a Story. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I know that last week, if you tuned in, you would have seen that I had mentioned I would not be doing a video this week, but there were some games I liked, so I thought I would mention them. And nothing wrong with taking the week off, but if you wanted to put a few dollars on some games, here are the ones I would recommend. By the way, before I get into that, so my contest finished. Actually, I had two $50 entries in DraftKings, and they both ended up being in the money. They were both the same record, which was 47 and 33, I believe it was. Is that 47 and 33? Is that correct? That would be 16 weeks. Yes, because we had 17 weeks and then a skip week. So just shy of 60%. But they were both good for 100 and I think it was $52. So anyway, I also went back during the year of the games that I recommended, which were not necessarily all of the ones where my contest selections and some of the lines might have varied by half point or so. I was 27, 18, and 2, which was exactly 60%. The juice was very close to what it typically would be. There were a couple games I had at minus 115 or minus 120. I think I either won or pushed those, so they didn't end up being relevant. I was on the losing side of a minus 108, which is pretty negligible. So for the most part, I was, your typical minus 110 juice, and that would net to 7.2 positive units. So pretty good year. All right, so I'm going to mention four games, and you can take from it what you will. And before I get into that, I'm just going to go over a minute or two of kind of, my thinking for Week 18. Well, which is kind of coincides with any week. But so when you think about it, even during the season, what are you looking for? You're looking for what you perceive the spot should be, basically to what the spot is, right? And the further it is from what the spot is, the more of an inefficiency it would be, and the more likely you are to bet. Well, week 18 doesn't really change that idea, but it does make it harder to hone in on what you think the spot should be. Well, what goes into what a person thinks a spot should be? Well, very often they have a model, which I've mentioned, and very often there are technical indicators. Technical indicators are patterns, basically, right? Team off of a blowout loss. Maybe 56% of the time they cover under certain situations, right? That's a technical indicator. And then finally, I would add intangibles. And very often, at least for me, that is coaching. Good coaching finds a way to go to maybe eke out an extra point or two in the long run, and of course, it's an educated guess as to sometimes what's a good coach and what's a bad coach. Um, an example, a team that I liked, a coach that I liked, and I've mentioned throughout the year are the Houston Texans. There's something about D'Amico Ryans and the command that I sense he has of his players. I just liked, not to mention winning two division titles in his first 2 years after taking over a 3-13 team. So that mattered also. But interestingly, they're over under um, or their projected wins by FTN, formerly Football Outsiders, I believe was just 7.9 wins. And you might recall again, I touted them. I didn't bet the over under because it was 9.5, but I did bet their Super Bowl odds, although FTN might have suggested against that with only 7.9 projected wins. But what did I think that was missing? Oh, I'm going to call it the D'Amico Ryans effect. No, they started 0-3. They could have finished whatever 6-11. So this is just one instance, but um, the turnaround I think was part and due to the coach, due to the coach. So anyway, that's an intangible that some of it's gut feel, whatever. I mean, sometimes you don't know that a coach is going to be good or bad, and you get a sense for maybe how they talk in their press conferences after a game. So anyway, so that all said, who do I like this week? I like the Bengals. They are giving 7.5 points to the Browns. Why do I like the Bengals? Well, let me also preface this also. Most teams are playing hard. I think everybody's playing hard if you're in the game, because for one thing, you're risking injury if you are not playing hard. Okay. So a lot of times when they say the teams are taking it easy or tanking, which I think is very rare, it's not that the players are not playing hard. It is that maybe they're just not playing their best personnel. Okay. So Bengals laying 7.5 to the Browns. Why do I like the Bengals? I think they're still playing hard. I believe Joe Burrow is going to play. I think what happens with some teams, and we saw this maybe with the Bengals, they had a crushing loss to the Bills about 4 weeks ago. They were just demoralized. If you saw Joe Burrow interviewed after the game, I mean, it looked like he didn't want to play football anymore. What happened? They got shut out the next game. I don't think that was a coincidence. But in some ways, the end of a season, and that Bills loss kind of was the end of their season. You go through a mourning process, right? Maybe it's almost like breaking up with a girlfriend or boyfriend. They went through it. They had their loss. And then what happens is these guys are professionals. They pick themselves up. The last week or two, they've looked good. I think they're playing hard for Zach Taylor. I think they're going to play their play. I think Burrow will play most or all of the game. And they still have a very good offense. I think their defense has gotten better. The Browns, on the other side, they won their Super Bowl last week. They beat the Steelers. They were celebrating afterward like they won. I think they're going to lay an egg. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Bengals win by 20 plus points. I'm on the Bengals laying 7.5 points. The Lions, somewhat similar to the Bengals. They are out of the playoffs. This had to be a shock to Dan Campbell. Um, I think 2 weeks ago, even though they weren't mathematically eliminated, they had just a few percent chance of making the playoffs. I think in their minds, they're out of the playoffs. So what happens? They went through their mourning process last week. I'm guessing they lost their third game in a row. I think they're going to pick themselves up. They're playing the Bears, who are playing for seeding, but not much else. I believe the Lions are 8-8. They want to finish with a positive record. Either way, they want to finish on a positive note. Dan Campbell is going to have them ready. I believe they are getting 2.5 points. And I am on the Lions this week. Atlanta, also trying to finish on a hard note, on a good note, I should say. They're going to be playing everybody. They're out of the playoffs. They're playing the Saints, who have won four in a row. Who have the Saints beaten in those 4 weeks? I was going to get a list. I forgot. Let's see. I know that the Titans were one of them. They've beaten nobodies. Maybe one fair team. Nobody in the playoffs. And it's not that they won their Super Bowl last week, but they've won four in a row. I think they're at the peak of their market. This is a technical trend that plays against them. I love betting against bad teams that are on a streak. And I like Atlanta, and they are giving 2.5 points to the Saints. They're at home. And then finally, Minnesota. Minnesota is laying, I believe it was last 6.5 points. I would lay 7.5, actually, if you need to, even across that seven, hosting Green Bay. Green Bay is a seventh seed. They can't go up. So this is a rare instance where you have a playoff team and they are locked into a seed. So, the Bears have a little bit to play for. They're a playoff team. They're locked into a seed. Excuse me, they're not locked into a seed. They're jockeying for a seed, which means a little bit. It doesn't mean that much, but the Packers, it means absolutely nothing. They're a seven seed, whether they win or lose. Last year, I believe the last week of the season, I could be wrong, but anecdotally, I'm recalling that Christian Watson was injured in that game. The Packers are banged up to begin with. I think they're going to rest everybody. They're going to be basically be playing their second stringers. This is going to be like an exhibition game. Minnesota, on the other hand, I believe will be playing hard, much like I think they're 8-8, so they're finishing on a strong note. JJ McCarthy certainly wants to finish on a strong note, having taken his lumps this year, as well as their coach O'Connell. So I look for um, Green Bay to again. They're going to be playing hard, but who's going to be playing? Their second stringers. I'm guessing. So sometimes coaches throw a little bit of a curveball and they surprise you, but the Packers have every reason to be playing their second stringers, and I look for Minnesota to win easily this game. So those are the four games I'm on. You know, putting maybe $50 on each game, just for that. Week 18 is always volatile, so there's some uncertainty with that, but that doesn't mean there's not positive equity. And as I like to tell my friends, and I'll mention on the show, it's all about positive equity. So, or at least what you perceive to be positive equity. So again, wishing everybody a healthy and happy, prosperous 2026, and see you next time on Statistics Tell the Story.